ready to go.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Executive this evening. Just welcome the councillors, officers and members of the public who are watching us, joining us online. Could I just ask members of the Executive to briefly introduce themselves? If I start with Councillor Hobson.
Councillor Jim Hobson, Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Cabinet Member for Business, Enterprise and Job Creation. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I've entitled Projects and Partnerships.
Councillor Farrell.
Councillor Joe Farrell, Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Health.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Councillor Gillian Campbell, Cabinet Member for Tourism and Culture.
And Councillor Kirkland.
Councillor Maria Kirkland, Cabinet Member for Community Cohesion and Leisure.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Councillor Neil Brooks, Cabinet Member for Housing and Welfare Reform.
And Councillor Benson.
Good evening, everybody. Councillor Kath Benson, Cabinet Member for Schools, Education and Aspiration.
Okay, thank you all very much. You're all now going to be muted. We're going to hold a minute's silence on the passing of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. It's be signalled from now. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Agenda item 1, declarations of interest. I don't believe that there are anybody. Nobody feels they want to declare anything. I'm going to second agenda item, which is exclusion of the public and press from item 6. If I could propose the public and press be excluded from the consideration of agenda item 6, approval to award a contract for a finance management and e-procurement system. This is on the grounds that this item contains a likely disclosure of information not for publication by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. This information contains ongoing negotiations with third parties, and the public interest will be served by making this information public at the point once the negotiations are concluded. Parts of that information would be published. Could somebody second, please? Councillor Taylor, thank you. And can we have a show of hands, please?
That's agreed.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, supported housing scrutiny review interim report. And Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, I'm pleased that we've got this on the agenda tonight because it seeks to address what has become an increasing problem in Blackpool, and I'm glad that the scrutiny team are on it. And I'm thankful for the final recognition at government level that there is a problem. For several years now, Blackpool have attempted to regulate supported housing in the town centre and across the borough by hopefully reducing the profitability of it in housing benefit terms. And we've sought to establish a link with government to say that, look, if supported housing is going to be provided and the increased rate of housing benefit, which isn't insignificant, by the way, the difference between housing benefit paid for a one-bedroom unit of £85 or whatever increases to 300 odd quid if the landlord claims to be providing supported housing. So there's a lot of money to be raised and made by actually utilising that loophole and making a profit out of the vulnerable people in our community. So we've tried over many years to resolve that. The government have said that they don't want to do that because it requires primary legislation. But fortunately, whether it's because we've been banging on about it for so long, along with other authorities, they've now established a pilot to actually look at the regulation or the potential regulation surrounding the supported housing accommodation, which is great news for Blackpool. And the scrutiny team have suggested that on top of that, if we're going to have that recognition at national level that there's a problem, we ought to be able at local level to say what we feel is an appropriate level of support that is given to vulnerable individuals that will attract that increased housing benefit subsidy. Because currently that isn't in place. And there's no regulation. All it is guidelines. And you can't enforce guidelines. All you can enforce is regulation. And I keep echoing, these are vulnerable members of our community. It might be drugs, it might be drink, it might be offenders, it might be people fleeing domestic violence. All these go into supported accommodation, are all worthy of support, and they're all worthy of our efforts. Because of the unique position we've got in Blackpool, where we've got a surplus of accommodation in terms of HMOs and rundown bed and breakfast and hotels being purchased by landlords simply seeking to let out to pseudo-supported housing and make a profit. Because we've got so much of that, other areas outside Blackpool think it's okay to send people to occupy supported housing places in Blackpool without any reference to our local social services, without any reference to our support teams. So effectively, they're dumping their what they term as problem individuals and vulnerable individuals in Blackpool with a private sector landlord that's seeking to make a profit out of that. We need to establish standards. So I'm fully behind this, the recommendations that we establish our own standards, what supported housing should look like in the town, and that the scrutiny committee play an active role in developing those standards. I'm hopeful that both our local MPs can get on board with this because they understand, as I understand, the amount of money it's costing the taxpayer to pay this increased housing benefit and for little or no return. I don't want to say there aren't good providers out there because there are a number of good providers out there that support our vulnerable people in the community. We're not about undermining that. We're about undermining people that simply purchase properties and seek to make a profit out of the vulnerable, at the expense of not only the individuals, but the expense of the taxpayer. And I'm absolutely certain that both our MPs will be on board with this. So I'll recommend the report for agreement tonight. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to make? Councillor Hobson?
Yeah, I'd just like to say how much I welcome this report. I've got a fair amount of anecdotal evidence from my constituents of some very poor supported housing out there. So the quicker we can knuckle this as an issue, the better, and the better it'll be for our communities. So as I say, just to say that I welcome this.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely vital and needed. So nobody else has any further questions? So I think you've proposed the two recommendations. I'm happy to second. So can we have a show of hands, please?
That's approved. So you've endorsed the two recommendations of the interim supported housing scrutiny as outlined in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, local transport plan programme 2021-22. I think we have Alan here to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. This shows how the allocation we've been issued under the LTP will be allocated to the various priorities within our local transport plan and strategy, and the usual top slice of this capital programme to go and help with other projects of 12.5% is included in there as well. this is about in line with what we've had in previous years. It's not particularly up or down, and is still probably a little bit short of where we would ideally be. But we are trying to bid for further monies outside of this programme to do some other essential works in the town centre through things like Towns Fund and Levelling Up Fund and so on and so forth. So this is distributed in accordance with the strategy that's already been approved by members, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hobson, did you want to add anything to that?
Just a couple of points, really. Members of the committee will note, of the exec will note, that there is £165,000 earmarked for cycling and walking in the town, which is fantastic, and also there's £100,000 earmarked for electric vehicle charging points. Now, as you will all be aware, we recently finished our People's Assembly on the climate emergency, and electric vehicle charging infrastructure will form a key part of the outcomes on that. So I'd just like to say this is probably the tip of the iceberg in terms of spend going forward over the next 8 years in terms of electric vehicle charging points. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments or questions for Alan? Yep. So, Councillor Hobson, are you moving the recommendation?
Yes, I will.
And I'm happy to second the recommendation. It's only there's 1 and 2 in the agenda. Can I have a show of hands?
Again, that's carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, delivering social value in public services procurement, a review of the council's social value policy and suppliers charter. I think we've got Steve here to introduce, or is it no? Ooh, well, it says Steve, relevant officer Steve, but John is to introduce. But John's not here.
Steve, it is Steve, yeah.
It is Steve.
Okay, thank you, Chair. For those members that don't know, social value, its definition is a process whereby organisations meet their needs for goods, services, works and utilities in a way that achieves value for money on a whole life basis. So not just on a two-dimensional basis of price and quality, but a whole range of other things, in particular generating benefits, not just to the organisation, but also to society and the wider economy, whilst minimising the damage to the environment. Now, the Social Value Act came in January 2013, and it's been a steep learning curve since then. The council approved its last social value policy back in 2014, and we have learnt a lot since then. In fact, back in 2017, the executive agreed a minimum 20% weighting to be applied to all council tenders. That really refocused tenderers into submitting imaginative, creative social value ideas. So this updated social value policy incorporates a whole range of new themes, outcomes and measures. We appointed a social value coordinator just over 12 months ago, and she's been a great help working between business support and procurement, and is pulling together these measures which will be used to evaluate progress, performance and success, and will be incorporated within the council's key performance indicators. So just to reiterate what the council's social value priorities are, and there's 7 or 8 of these: promoting employment and economic sustainability, raising the living standards of residents, promoting participation and citizen engagement, building capacity and sustainability of the voluntary and community sectors, promoting equity and fairness, promoting sustainability and delivering environmental benefits. And besides this social value policy, we've also got an accompanying suppliers charter that's been updated in consultation with suppliers to provide prospective suppliers with a user-friendly guide to adopting the policies and practices that align with those key principles of embedding good, responsible employment, social, environmental and community practices within their own organisations. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody have any questions? I mean, Councillor Taylor, you're did you want to say something further? I know you're moving the recommendations. Excuse me. You're on mute, Councillor Taylor.
Okay, sorry about that, Chair. Very happy to propose the recommendations tonight. Blackpool is, of course, the council a major provider of commissioning right across the board, many millions of pounds. And we have to make sure, obviously, that it just doesn't work for us financially, but also works for us socially. We've been doing that for some time now, with some success, I have to say. But I regard this revision of it as a real step forward in terms of concentrating on what we're trying to do and to make sure, indeed, that the people of Blackpool do get social value out of the contracts for which they are paying for. That there's a real element in there which we know is going to have local value other than the financial one. So I think it's going to be very, very important for the executive and members, excuse me, to participate in this process, to monitor it. And I would suggest that possibly the leadership board is such a body which could take this under its wing and look at the performance indicators, look at all the other factors involved with each contract, and to make sure that this has been implemented in a way which gets the maximum value. I really think we need to do that as a follow-up from tonight's decision if we agreed. But I hope very much that we do, so I'll propose it.
Yeah, thank you. So that, excuse me, I've got a croaky throat. So it's a two recommendation at 2.1,
Yeah,
2.2 in the agenda. So I'll second that. Is any, sorry, Councillor Brooks?
Yeah, I mean, I'm well on board with this. I think it's long overdue, if you like. And I think at the back of it, we need to recognise that it's not just about delivering various things for social value for us. It's also about saying that we're not just going to buy or procure things to the cheapest bidder, because it's about having a responsible attitude towards what employers do to employees. And one of the things within this policy is that suppliers are meant to work towards paying the just voluntary living wage, maximise employee access to entitlements such as childcare, and encourage suppliers to source labour from within Blackpool. All things that are dear to all our hearts, I suspect. And it's written down, and it's just an assurance that we aren't just going to sell to the cheapest bidder. We expect decent employers to be working with the council. Otherwise, they're not welcome. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. So since the involvement of this sort of in 2014, and now it's being sort of updated and reviewed to improve and make it better for the future. But in the before and up to now, we've where larger companies have tendered for contracts within the council. Also, as part of the tender is also having apprenticeships and traineeships within the contracts, which is also upskilled the sort of skills and the employments of and future aspirations of the residents of Blackpool. So it sort of also has another benefit there. And also when the money is spent within the town, it also helps the growth and better town for the whole of everybody in Blackpool. So it's more, also, as I said, like employment and job creation as well within this. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Taylor, did you want to make a further comment?
No, I very much agree with the comments that have been made, including Councillor Smith. You're absolutely right, and that is central to it. The apprenticeships, the pay, local labour is something that's only an element, but a very, very important element of what we're going to do. And what we try to do now, what we're going to do it even more in the future, as well as other more innovative ways of ensuring social value. So I'm glad to see members giving support to that.
Absolutely, thank you. So can we have a show of hands in respect to the two recommendations?
That's agreed, Chair.
Thank you. And agenda item 5, levelling up and community renewal. Alan, again, to introduce the item.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an interesting couple of schemes here, Levelling Up Fund and Community Renewal Fund. Basically, we are being asked to run these by government. It's interesting that they're using local authorities to do this rather than some of the other structures that exist in the region and elsewhere. Certainly the Community Renewal Fund is very much asking us to act as a grant allocation agency, if you like, asking for bids from around the community of Blackpool and evaluating those bids and putting forward the suggested package of proposed schemes. The Levelling Up Fund has been, in a sense, the Community Renewal Fund was a bit of a surprise, but the guidance is in line with the recommendations that you have. So the guidance of how we run that Community Renewal Fund is effectively what the recommendation is in respect to the Community Renewal Fund. The other one, Levelling Up Fund, has been much heralded prior to its release, and we're still in a position where we're not entirely sure exactly what we qualify for, but we'll of course try and get everything we possibly can. But we certainly, each area is entitled to one bid under the Levelling Up Fund, which is up to £20 million. And in some cases, they would be entitled to more than one. If we had two MPs whose boundaries were entirely contiguous with the local authorities or within the local authorities, then we would be able to bid for two lots of Levelling Up Fund, like 2 lots of £20 million. But because one of our MPs, the one in the north, shares a few wards with Wyre, it's not quite as straightforward as that. And we're currently working with that particular MP and with Wyre to figure out exactly what we do in respect of that one. So the recommendation refers to the one that we know we can have, which is it within the constituency of Scott Benton in Blackpool South, and the other one is potentially, but maybe not certainly, available to us. And then there is a third package of bidding that's a possibility, which is a joint transport bid with a neighbouring authority. And we're not sure whether we can have that as well. But anyway, as things occur, we will bring them forward. But we know that we've got this opportunity to bid in Blackpool South, and the first date on which we can bid is in June. We would like to bring forward a package of bids for June, which we will obviously consult with and work with the appropriate cabinet members and the leader and deputy leader to consider what should be within that package, as well as the team that's described in the papers that you've seen.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions, comments they wanted to make? I'm losing my voice. I think it's so warm in here. Councillor Smith, were you?
I was just going to say what Alan's sort of explained. It's quite a complicated setup and arrangements with around these MPs and number of bids we can have, and it's quite a sort of complex structure of systems here. I'm not quite sure, so it's make it so more difficult these days for the government and our funding bids. But as in the past, every time we have an opportunity to bid for funding to improve the Blackpool, we do, and we try to sort of maximise the benefit outcome of that. So I just wanted to follow up on the good words Alan said and what we're trying to do. And the sort of in this, we've got sort of tight timescale as well to push this through. So we're just going to work hard to achieve the goals and the dates set out in the report.
Okay, thank you. Very good. So if I could move recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 within the agenda. Anybody seconding?
I second it.
Thank you. Show of hands, please.
Right, that's carried, Chair. Now you can close the public section of the meeting, and my colleague will stop the broadcast.